The slap cracked through the quiet street before I even reached the door. I froze on the porch, purse strap cutting into my fingers, and looked through the gap where the door hadn't latched. My daughter Claire was on the hardwood floor, one hand pressed to her cheek, shoulders shaking with no sound coming out. Around her lay the shattered pieces of the casserole dish I'd packed for her that afternoon. Standing over her was her husband, Derek Sinclair. The polished smile he'd worn at dinner an hour earlier was gone. He was yanking at his own tie like it was choking him, chest heaving, eyes bloodshot with the kind of rage that comes from a man used to being obeyed. I didn't scream. I didn't burst in demanding answers. I just tightened my grip on my purse, my mind suddenly terribly clear. Then Derek saw me through the gap. Margaret. His mouth twisted into something close to a sneer. Back for your purse? Good timing. Tell your daughter to stop being so dramatic. He straightened his tie, recovering fast. I pay every bill in this house, and she's sulking because I bragged a little in front of her own mother. That was when the man standing just behind me in the porch shadow spoke. Derek. One word. Derek's face drained of color like water pulled through a drain. Because the man stepping into the light beside me, tall, silver-haired, calm-eyed, was Nathaniel Cross, CEO of Halbrook Logistics. Derek's boss. Derek's mouth opened and closed with nothing coming out. His knees actually buckled. There was no version of tonight where his boss showing up on his doorstep, standing beside his mother-in-law, made any kind of sense, and slowly, right there in the doorway, he sank to his knees. An hour earlier, I'd really only come back for a forgotten purse. Dinner had been Derek's idea, an expensive steakhouse. The priciest table, charm turned all the way up for the staff while Claire sat barely touching her plate. Walking them home, I realized I'd left my purse at the table and turned back alone. That's when I ran into Nathaniel Cross on the sidewalk. I'd known him for years. Walter had mentored him back when he was a junior analyst, long before Halbrook made him CEO. He wasn't smiling tonight, though. He pulled his car over. Margaret, has anyone contacted you about a medical claim in your name? A surgery? No, why? Our HR department just approved a hardship withdrawal filed under your name. Terminal diagnosis, $300,000. He watched my face. I've been looking into Derek's desk for 2 weeks. This isn't the first number that didn't add up. That's when we heard the yelling from inside the house. What Claire had already started, what Nathaniel didn't know yet, and what I wouldn't learn until later that night, was that Claire hadn't been sitting quietly through any of this. 3 weeks earlier, she'd found a locked drawer in Derek's home office that had never been locked before. She hadn't said anything to him. She'd started paying attention instead, watching which calls made his face go pale, which nights he came home smelling like a bar he swore he hadn't been to, why the same $4,000 vanished from the account statement every month on the 25th. She'd started photographing documents on her phone when he was in the shower. She hadn't told me, because she hadn't been ready to say the word afraid out loud yet, not even to herself. That night, on the floor with her cheek still burning, the phone with those photos was in her back pocket the entire time. The living room Nathaniel insisted a doorway was no place for this conversation, so we moved into the living room. Derek walked ahead of us like a man walking toward his own execution. The room looked more like a showroom than somewhere a family lived, everything symmetrical, cold, untouched. My eyes caught an old photo of Walter laughing with Claire as a little girl. Her smile is the greatest thing I ever built, he used to say. I helped Claire up off the floor and saw the bruises circling her wrists, half hidden under sleeves she never used to wear. Something in me that had stayed quiet for a long time finally caught fire. Sit down, Derek, Nathaniel said. Not a request. Derek sat. Claire didn't. She stood beside me, arms crossed, and for the first time all night, she looked less like a woman on the floor and more like her father's daughter. Start with the diagnosis, she said quietly. Tell my mother what you told HR she has. Derek's eyes flicked between us. Claire, this isn't terminal, she said. You told them she was terminal. You used her name to steal money for a surgery she never needed, because you needed cash and you didn't care whose name you burned to get it. I felt the floor tilt slightly. I'm not sick, I said. I haven't seen a doctor in over a year. Claire nodded, like she already knew that. Because she did. There's more, she said, and pulled out her phone. What came out, piece by piece? She didn't hand over everything at once. She'd learned that from watching Derek control every conversation for a year. Drip it out. Let the silence do the work. First, the photo of the forged insurance application. Claire as the insured. Derek as sole beneficiary, $1 million. her signature forged beside a fake notary stamp. "He told me it was the only value I had left to give him," she said, and her voice didn't shake once. Then a screenshot of the account statement, a card opened in her name that she'd never signed for, a $10,000 cash withdrawal from 3 days earlier. Nathaniel sat forward. "Derek, whose account has been receiving $4,000 from you every month for the last 5 years?" Derek's jaw worked. He didn't answer. "A woman named Vanessa Cole," Claire said. "I found the name years ago on his phone. He told me it was a wrong number." She looked at Derek now, not at us. "It wasn't, was it?" Roger Derek's silence broke a different way the next morning. My late husband's brother Roger called me sounding oddly gentle, the kind of gentle that comes with an agenda. "Margaret, Derek's worried about you. He mentioned some memory lapses. I think we should all sit down as a family this Sunday." I already understood what that meant before I hung up the phone. Derek had gotten to Roger first, feeding him a story about my mind failing, hoping to use him as a witness to push through a plan to sell my house out from under me. I agreed to the meeting without protest. By Sunday, I intended Derek to walk in believing he'd already won. Building the case. The days between were not quiet. I went to the bank and froze every account in my name, so no forged power of attorney could touch a cent of it. Nathaniel introduced me to an attorney he trusted completely, Robert Hale, who spent 2 nights going through Derek's old private ledger, the one Claire had photographed weeks before any of us knew to look for it. 5 years of $4,000 transfers to Vanessa Cole. Robert's read on it. Once he'd traced the account back, was blunt. Derek had likely embezzled funds from a previous employer using her name on the account, and she'd been quietly bleeding him for it ever since. That explained the calls, the panic, the desperation for cash that had led him eventually to my name and Claire's signature. Robert found Vanessa Cole living 2 towns over, working the counter at a dry cleaner's. He asked me to come with him, in case seeing another woman's face made her more willing to talk than a lawyer's card would. She recognized Derek's name before Robert even finished the sentence. Her hands went still on the counter. "He told me I owed him," she said. "Years ago, at his old job, I let him route some vendor payments through my account because he said it was temporary, a paperwork thing. Then he started calling it hers, mine, like I'd stolen it. Said if I ever stopped taking his transfers, he'd tell everyone I'd embezzled it myself." She looked at me then, not at Robert. "He's been paying me to stay quiet about a crime he committed. I just didn't have anywhere to go with that. Nobody was going to believe me over him." "I would have," I said. She didn't cry, but her jaw trembled once before she nodded. By the next morning, she'd given Robert a full signed statement. The original embezzlement, 5 years of payments, all of it. Claire sat with me at my kitchen table that night, going through it all one more time. "I keep thinking I should have said something sooner," she said quietly. "You said something the moment you were ready," I told her. "That's not the same as too late." Sunday, Roger arrived with his wife and a folder of brochures for a locked memory care facility. Derek arrived with paperwork transferring my house into his name and a silver pen he slid across the table like he was doing me a favor. "It's the only way to protect you." "Margaret," he said, "I didn't touch the pen." "And how exactly were you planning to pay for it?" "Personal savings?" "That's right. The account that wires $4,000 out every month on the 25th? Every ounce of color left his face at once. Claire came down the stairs at that exact moment with the lockbox of letters. Roger sat frozen as the truth unraveled in front of him, piece by piece, in his own family's living room. Derek didn't fold quietly. He stood up so fast his chair scraped back across the floor. "You think a lockbox proves anything?" He snapped at Claire. "You signed things. You knew what you were signing. Nobody forced your hand across that paper." He turned on me next, voice rising. "And you've been against me since the day I proposed, Margaret. Don't pretend this is anything but you finally getting what you wanted." "I wanted my daughter safe," I said. "That's all I've ever wanted. She is safe. She has a house, a car, a life I built for her. With money you stole from me and from Vanessa Cole, Clary." Claire said, and her voice didn't waver. "I have the wire records, Derek. I have the insurance application. I have 5 years of it. He tried divorce as a threat next. Said he'd leave her buried in debt from the card he'd forged in her name. Said no lawyer would touch her case fast enough to matter." He was still talking, still swinging, when the doorbell rang. Nathaniel and Robert walked in together, carrying Vanessa's signed confession and the original embezzlement paperwork. Derek looked at the folder in Robert's hands, then at Vanessa's signature on the page, and whatever fight was left in him finally went out. He sat back down without being told to. There was nothing left for him to twist. After Claire stood and signed the divorce papers herself, right there, asking for nothing but to be free of him. She laid the medical report of her injuries and the fraud claim on the forged card next to the pen Derek had brought for me. He didn't argue. He didn't have anything left to argue with. Nathaniel confirmed Halbrook would press charges for the embezzlement. Robert said the police would be waiting for him by morning. Roger, ashamed at how easily he'd been used, told Derek quietly that they were done being family. Derek walked out that door alone, carrying nothing but the truth he could no longer outrun. A month later, Robert called to confirm Derek had confessed to everything once the evidence became impossible to deny. Claire's divorce was finalized without complication, the fraudulent debt wiped from her name. She's different now, not just safer, but steadier. Some evenings she comes by and we sit at the kitchen table the way we did the night before Sunday, except now it's just tea and no lockbox between us. Last week she told me she'd started looking at a part-time position near Robert's office. Something that's just mine, she said. One of those evenings, she reached across the table and took my hand, the way she used to when she was small and couldn't sleep. I used to think I let it go on too long because I was weak, she said. But it wasn't that. I just didn't know that I was allowed to be believed. You were always allowed, I said, my throat tight. I'm sorry it took me this long to make sure you knew that. You came back for a purse, she said, and almost smiled. And you stayed for me. I'll always come back for you, I told her. Purse or no purse. We still light a candle by Walter's photo some nights. I tell him quietly that his home is still standing, that his daughter is safe, that everything he built for us is still exactly where he left it. If you've made it this far, thank you for sitting with Claire's story. If it meant something to you, follow along. There's always another story of someone finding their way back to themselves.